Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Sunday, February the 28th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association may as well be called the Country Club Press Association. I'll explain why. Coming up next.
The winner is Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
Accepting the award for Marlon Brando in The Godfather, Miss Shasheen Littlefeather.
Hello, my name is Shasheen Littlefeather. I'm Apache, and I'm president of the National Native American Affirmative Image Committee. I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening, and he has asked me to tell you in a very long speech, which I cannot share with you presently because of time, but I will be glad to share with the press afterwards, that he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, and on television in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee. I beg at this time that I have not intruded upon this evening, and that we will, in the future, our hearts and our understandings will meet with love and generosity. Thank you on behalf of Marlon Brando.
Now, Shonda Rhimes, Ava DuVernay, and other Hollywood heavyweights are taking to social media, calling out the Hollywood Foreign Press Association for not having a single black member. On Thursday, the association said it promises to diversify. This year, 3 women are nominated for Best Director, 3 years after Natalie Portman made this memorable statement while introducing the directing category.
And here are the all-male nominees.
Welcome back. So tonight the Golden Globes are being televised live across the United States, but I won't be watching it, and I know there'll be some others who won't either, and there's a really good reason for that. And the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which is a group of journalists who are working for press organizations based overseas, but who live in Los Angeles, working for those overseas-based organizations, is a group of 87 members. And when you look at the world, it's important to look at the world with a global perspective. And that's what I choose to do. I choose to look at the world through a global mindset and through global eyes, because the world is not just the United States of America. And I know that, of course, when you're living in the United States, you are given this impression by the way the news media covers things and what it covers and the way people speak about the country who live here, as if there's no other country on the planet but the United States. And I dare say this mentality is adopted by some in some other countries, but it's really endemic here in the US of A. So if you're called the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, and if you are an organization that looks at film, that looks at TV, and if you realize that there's a thing called Netflix, And on that thing called Netflix, there are TV shows. And those TV shows come from around the world. There are French ones. There are ones from different other countries. Not too many things on Netflix that are shown in the African continent, but there should be. And that really brings me to the heart of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, because the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, in its 87 people who work for the Hollywood Foreign Press, who are part of it, who work for really the organization or organizations based in different countries, but whom live in Los Angeles, California, Los Angeles. Of those 87 persons, not one of them is black. Not one. This is 2021. It is not 1971 or 1973. That speech you heard there from Sacheen Little Feather. Sacheen Little Feather in 1973 gave that speech you heard. And that was one of the most famous Oscar speeches. And it was a non-acceptance speech. It was having heard the name Marlon Brando read out. She declined the award, as did Marlon Brando. And Marlon Brando had her speaking as his representative, as you heard there. It's the kind of thing that should have been done, quite frankly, decades before, but it was his opportunity to make a statement. And I'm not saying that Brando should have done this decades before. I am saying that surely someone should have thought of that before Marlon Brando, and I don't know that they have. I like to think that as someone who is in film and is a film critic and looks at these things, that there would be a more, put it this way, I would like to think that someone in the industry who is white knew that Hollywood portrayed Native Americans in the way that they've portrayed them, in the way that the country has treated Native Americans, whose country this is. I would have liked to have thought that in all the years of film history, at least from the Academy Awards, from 1926 or 27 on, that someone before 1973 and someone from 1926 through 1972, that it occurred to someone white in that industry that, Native Americans aren't being treated well, that we aren't treating them well. I'm sure someone knows that, and someone knew that in those previous 52 years or 50 whatever years before Sacheen Littlefeather in 1973 got to that podium in Los Angeles, California, and said what you heard her just say. And you heard boos. And then you heard some applause of support, not for the booing, but for Sacheen Littlefeather. This was not a publicity stunt. This was a statement. And it was one that someone white should have been making back in the 1920s and 30s. And no one white did make that statement then. Marlon Brando talked about it on Dick Cavett on a number of years ago. And that actually, there's a clip of that that's been shared on social media. In fact, one of the people who tweeted that clip out, or shared it certainly, was the filmmaker Ava DuVernay. And you heard from Ava DuVernay, or at least you heard about her in that clip also that came up afterwards from NBC News about the Golden Globes. This is the issue that Hollywood, the racism that Hollywood has perpetuated for a century now, a century at least. And of course there were white people who knew what they were doing. D.W. Griffith knew what he was doing when he directed The Birth of a Nation. The Charlie Chan movies. The people or the person or the men who directed those movies, they knew what they were doing. Or the director of that knew what he was doing. When you have The Good Earth put on the big screen and you have a white woman playing an Asian woman, and I believe that particular white woman won the Oscar, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, for appearing in what I would call yellowface. I don't know what Asian people would call it, but they may well call it the same thing. Someone who is Asian can tell me. Surely those white people knew that was wrong and it was racist. Surely they knew that. Surely they knew that. Gone with the Wind. And all those other movies that trivialized enslavement, that trivialized and marginalized black people, that marginalized and ridiculed Native Americans, called them savages, called black people savages. I mean, when white filmmakers and directors and writers did things like Tarzan, you don't think that they knew what they were doing? Or with King Kong and the overt racist stereotyping and denigrations that were going on even with King Kong, that many people think, oh, that's just harmless. But no, there's something else going on there. And it doesn't take some brilliant mind to see that, if one chooses to see it, or if someone chooses not to. Chooses to ignore it. Because, my, this movie was awfully good. So, it's not perfect. As someone told me yesterday on Twitter about Dances with Wolves, another disreputable piece of work vis-a-vis Native Americans from 1990. This isn't from 1929 or 1920 or 1930. It's 1990. And the Academy threw 7 Oscars at it. I'm not saying that Dances with Wolves was not well-made. Well, heck, there's a lot of well-made movies, but some of them are well-made garbage. And some of them are well-made, and they are the most racist, most misogynistic, most denigrating piece of garbage on film, pieces of garbage on film that you've seen. Oh, but the production values. Well, yeah. There's a lot of well-made stuff, like Dances with Wolves, that has very poisonous imagery and very, very denigrating, marginalizing themes and messages being played. That white male-centered, paternalistic marginalizing of Native Americans. This has gone on forever. You don't think that Kevin Costner had some knowledge of that? You don't think that those Academy voters in 1991 knew that when they bestowed 7 Oscars on Dances with Wolves, that it was from a white male perspective and it was a marginalizing that represented really a century of marginalizing of Native Americans? And you don't think that John Ford, the director of The Searchers, you don't think that when he did that movie with John Wayne and Natalie Wood, no less, playing a Native American, a white woman playing a Native American, you don't think that they knew? All of them, including Natalie Wood. She's not going to escape this. You don't think that the whole system there? I think Warner Brothers put that movie out back in, what was it, the 50s? 56? I don't remember when The Searchers came out. But the point is, you don't think that they knew that Native Americans were being marginalized? You don't think that? You don't think that Mickey Rooney knew that when he did what I call yellow face or Asian face in Breakfast at Tiffany's? You don't think that Mickey Rooney knew what he was up to? That was despicable. You don't think that the blackface that was done, and I know Burt Williams, who's a black man, did that. He was forced. He had nothing else. He didn't have a career if he didn't do that. Because there's a system in place that the white men of that time ran and controlled and still do. And that framework that they've put in place is a framework of subjugating black, brown, Asian, and native voices at the expense of those voices so that these white men and white women, some of them, can feel better about who they are, and it is a means of control and power. That's what this is. Control, power, dominance, oppression through the movie-making industry, through television. The imagery that we see is powerful. And that shapes the hearts and the minds of millions of people around the world. All of these things connect. This is not in a vacuum, dear listener. You know this. You know this. I'm not telling you something that you don't know. All of these things are connected. All of them. Do you not think that the Academy thinks and knows that in 93 or 94 years of its Oscars, 93 or 4 years of Oscar, that there's been only one black woman who has ever won Best Actress, and that was Halle Berry in 2002 for Monsters Ball? Quite frankly, I don't think that performance was that good, to be really brutally honest. And I don't think there's ever been an Asian woman that's ever won Best Actress. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I know that Hang S. Noor won for The Killing Fields, the supporting actor, back in 1984-85, whenever that movie came out. But there's never been, to the best of my recollection, an Asian actress, an Asian woman. And I don't like to use the term actress because they're all actors. So let's strip the gender out of it. But I know for the sake of the Oscars, they still use the term actress. So instead of female actor and male actor, which is what the Screen Actors Guild does. And I like that much better. But the Oscars are not changing anytime soon in terms of how they designate the names of these awards. And so for the sake of that, that's when you hear me use that term, that's why I use it in that context. And there's not been a black Best Director ever. Never has been. And there's never been a black female director even nominated for Best Director. We've had a few black men directors, black directors who are men, who were nominated for Best Director. Spike Lee has been nominated more recently for it. Barry Jenkins has been. Steve McQueen has been. Lee Daniels, I believe, was at some point. If not Lee Daniels, certainly John Singleton was for Boys in the Hood. And that was a time, I remember when Joan London, then of Good Morning America, I believe, just lost it. Why wasn't Barbra Streisand nominated? It's got to be because of that black guy. And I agree with her about the part where she says, why wasn't Barbra Streisand nominated? But to then point at John Singleton like he's the one keeping Barbra Streisand from her spot is dishonest. And she should have pointed at the other 3 white men that were nominated and not the one black man who was. I think at that time, John Singleton became not only the youngest Best Director nominee, but I think the first black man to be nominated for Best Director. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about that, because maybe Gordon Parks was nominated for it one time in the 60s or 70s. Maybe it was Shaft in 71. I don't know. I have to go look that up. But my whole point here is that before getting into the disgrace of the HFPA, Hollywood Foreign Press Association, you have to look at everything in context and not in isolation. Because, of course, these stories get reported in isolation as if, that's the one organization that doesn't have black members in it, in film. Just look, literally, this is like a country club. And it's not only film, right? There's a lot of this going on in all kinds of industries. Some less glamorous and some less cutthroat. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association, with all of that said, and I want to also include, before I even continue on, how many representations of, I can go on about this all day. And this has been going on for centuries. And I stopped myself because there are some things I want to propose as solutions. And some people are already doing these things, so they're not new ideas that I'm proposing. There are more or less some things that need to be said and put forth in a different way. And whether it's the absence of black women, whether it is the marginalization of black women, whether it is the denigration of black women and black men on the big screen, whether it's the portrayal for dozens of years of black people as mammies and porters and bus drivers and butlers. For years, that was what black people were portrayed as on the big screen. For decades. You wouldn't see a black person anywhere unless they were picking up after someone white on the big screen. You wouldn't see that anywhere. The same is true in real life. And then there's movies like Hidden Figures that come along that tell us about a Katherine Johnson, that tell us about these other great black women who were mathematicians and scientists, who really were indispensable to NASA. NASA couldn't be what it is today without people like Katherine Johnson. Couldn't be. And she works for them in the 50s and 60s. NASA couldn't have been what it is now without people like Katherine Johnson. And then the movie comes out only maybe 5 years ago, only maybe 6 years ago did Hidden Figures come out. Whenever that was, 2016, 17, 14, whenever it was. Only a few years ago. The whole industry is dominated by white men. The whole industry. And yes, there are great people who've made the strides, who have done the work. More work than I've ever done when it comes to actually getting inside these organizations. I've done work on different levels, but not on the level of getting inside the academy like Ava DuVernay has, like the former Academy president, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, who, remember, was a font of ridicule. I remember some of these white male film critics and white male film commentators ridiculing her, insulting her. She got a mispronunciation. She didn't say something correct. She didn't say that white filmmaker's name correctly. And so on Twitter, there was a day or two or a week of let's go and attack the black woman, because the black woman who is the Academy Award president didn't pronounce the filmmaker's name correctly. So that means she's kind of less than because she didn't pronounce the name correct. Give me a break. But that's what happened. And so Cheryl Boone Isaacs was one of those individuals who, while Academy president, was pushing changes, made changes, and got inside that organization and said, right, we need to change the structure of this thing. We need to have more black members, more female members of any group, any racial group. And we need to tamp down on what we've got here with this membership being 94% white and something like 93% male. And over the age, I'm going to say it, of 65. Most of these members, and it's not ageist, I'm pointing out what the numbers are. The Los Angeles Times, the LA Times, Los Angeles Times, did a study on this less than 10 years ago now. Might have been 2010, might have been about 10, 11 years ago. You've got to read that. I'll have to see if I can find that, and I'll put a link to it. You have to look at that study to see that the Academy is still humongously white. Blindingly white, which explains why you've got virtually no black winners. And it's not because there aren't black films, and it's not because there aren't black women, and it's not because there aren't black men, it's not because there aren't black producers and directors. It's not because there's not black sound people or black lighting people or black costume designers. One of them won just 2 years ago for Black Panther. And black production designers. It's not that one of them won just 2 years ago for Black Panther. Yeah, I repeated that, but that's two different black female winners. Hannah Beachler, the production designer for Black Panther, and the esteemed Ruthie Carter, who won for Black Panther in the costume design. The first ever wins by black women in those categories. Come on now. Come on now. This is really despicable. And Cheryl Boone Isaacs was one of those people in that fight, and still is. I mean, I'm sure behind the scenes, Ava DuVernay is another, the filmmaker Ava DuVernay and other people who are diversifying that industry now. And I'm telling you, just over a year ago, when you saw Parasite and you saw Bong Joon-ho do what he did, and that cast win Best Picture, one of the highlights of the Academy Awards for me in the last God knows how many years is that moment. And of course, when black winners who I thought were terrific, when they won, when Steve McQueen won for 12 Years a Slave, although again, every film has its pluses and minuses, but I'm happy when people who look like me win. And when they win for something that is really good quality. Am I happy when someone black wins for something that isn't that great? I can take that or leave it. But how many white people win for things that aren't great? Oh God, like La La Land. Can we stop at La La Land, please? For 500, Mr. Trebek, and I know you are in greener pastures these days. But can we start with La La Land and the 11 or 12 Oscar nominations that piece of garbage got? Can we start with that? And Emma Stone. And a performance that won Best Actress, and I still don't know why. And the speech that she gave that really should have had that Oscar revoked from her. Because how do you make a speech like that? Or Matt Damon, the most mediocre actor you can find on the planet. How does this guy get nominated for things that he's just not good at? He's not interesting. He's got no presence. I get it, Good Will Hunting, I think he did a decent job in. Some people profoundly disagree with me. But I think Good Will Hunting, he's actually decent in that. But he's not done anything since then that merits this meteoric rise and praise. But that's the system. The whole point of me doing this, again today, with this particular episode, is a system. And the system isn't just there, oh, it's a system. There are people behind it. White men behind it. Who have power, who have wealth. And this is how they use their power and their wealth to crush and to sideline and to marginalize black, brown, Asian, native voices, female voices, gay voices, trans voices. That's what the industry is. That's what it continues to be. That's what it has been. And what we need are people who use their power for good. For the white people in the industry who are contributing to trying to get more black members in, to get more Asian members in, to get more Latinas in. Native voices. You can't keep this running. You cannot keep it running. You cannot. This is global. This is a global world. You know how many people are out here in this middle of this big ass nowhere of what we call planet Earth? It's not a big ass nowhere, but it's a place where there are black people and white people and Asian and straight and gay and trans and native and Latino and all other kinds of indigenous peoples. And some people don't like that term indigenous. I will use the term native. Some people don't like that either. And there's reasons why. So, I mean, I've got to look at, again, I talk about language because it's important. It is important. And some people might say, oh my God, don't do that. You're so exacting about this stuff. Why don't you relax? No. Language means something. Words mean something. They aren't throwaways like so many people do. They casually use language and these throwaway words. Half the time, they don't even know what they're saying. Or if they do, it's embedded so deep, it's automatic. And I talked about this several weeks ago regarding this conversation I did the moderation for. And someone asked me about, well, why is the race card offensive? Why is the... It's like, and again, it's this autopilot systemic language we use that's really oppressive language. It's the whole thing about enslaver versus slavery and calling black people slaves when you should be calling black people enslaved peoples or enslaved persons, because that describes what you, the white man, has done to them, did do to them. But if you say the word slaves, you are speaking in masses language, the enslaver's language, because that's what he called black people. And he called them even worse than that. And we just swim in this. So there's so much unlearning to do from the beginning. And when you are in a film industry where you still have more black valets and more black butlers at your after parties than you do black Oscar winners for best actress who are black, then you've got a blooming problem. And I want to pay thanks to the people who are trying to fix the problem, who are fixing it. The Ava DuVernays and the Cheryl Boone Isaacs and and numbers of other people who are getting involved. A similar thing has to be done with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. And it's not the Bollywood Foreign Press, it's the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Or as I call it, the Country Club Press Association. Because even golf, to some degree, has advanced more. Even bloomin' golf has advanced more than the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Not a single black member in its 87 member group. Not one is black in this global village that we are in. You can connect someone on Zoom here in San Francisco to someone on the African continent, as I did recently when I spoke to one of the guests I spoke to, Dr. Beata Campman. She was on the African continent when I spoke to her. So you can speak to people all over the world on Zoom. And the Hollywood Foreign Press Association has not one member who is black. Not friggin' one. Yeah, you should be upset about that. And yes, there should be people highlighting and coming clear to the fore, as they have been over these last few days, to criticize the HFPA. Shonda Rhimes, as you heard in that report. Ava DuVernay, as you've heard in that report. And others. Judd Apatow has weighed in on this. And Sterling K. Brown put out a statement on Instagram about this. To be nominated, and I'm reading part of it now, to be nominated for a Golden Globe is a tremendous honor. To win one is a dream come true. It can affect the trajectory of an individual's career. It certainly has with mine. I'm presenting at the telecast this weekend to honor all the storytellers, especially those of color, who have achieved this extraordinary moment in their careers. And I have my criticisms of the hashtag HFPA. 87 people wield a tremendous amount of power. For any governing body of a current Hollywood award show to have such a lack of voting representation illustrates a level of irresponsibility that should not be ignored. That was a statement on Instagram this week. In fact, it was just yesterday, the 27th, Saturday the 27th of February 2021. Sterling K. Brown, you know and love Sterling K. Brown. I have not watched This Is Us, by the way, but I know that Sterling K. Brown has done many movies and other TV, and I'm very familiar with him from the big screen, including films like, I almost said Hamilton, Marshall, which he did with the late, great Chadwick Boseman, who I think is going to win tonight. But look, I'm not watching these Globes tonight. I am not watching them. And nobody cares that I'm not watching. Nobody cares. It's not about whether somebody cares or not. It's about you having respect for yourself and you having respect for your ancestors. But I'm not only going to not watch the Globes. I'm going to be involved in spreading the message and doing other things to elevate black talent. Because I think that film critics, or at least film people who are working in the journalistic side of things, and I get it, some of you work for these big organizations and you don't want to be looked at as activists. But you should be looked at as activists because the fact that you were there means that you stood on the shoulders of people like Sydney and Dorothy and Josephine. And people like Hattie. And people like James. And people like Diane. And people like Sydney, if I didn't mention his name before. People like Cicely. You were there because of an Ida, of a Harriet. You stood on their shoulders. So you are there because someone laid the path before that you could walk on, so that you could have a Viola Davis, so that you could have a Cheryl Lee Ralph, a Issa Rae, a Wanda Sykes, a Kerry Washington. Kerry Washington recognizes this. Ava DuVernay knows this. Gina Prince Bythewood knows this. Casey Lemons knows. Julie Dash, Uzan Palsy. They all know. And if you don't know who those persons are, whose names I just spoke, right off the top of my head, then please go to your local internets and type in their names if you can spell them. I hope you can. But even if you misspell their names, you will find out who they are. Just type in a search engine if you happen to have internet access, for those of you who do. And please find out who these people are. Please. And then, more than that, watch their work and support their work. Okay? Please, support their work. Dee Reese wouldn't have been here without the people whose shoulders she stands on. And if you don't know who Dee Reese is, please use the internets that you have, if you have them. The internets, please use them. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association is a country club, and there have been lawsuits. I'm going to link to them. I don't have really a lot of time to talk about the antitrust lawsuit that was brought, but I guess it was a Finnish journalist, I believe a Finnish white woman journalist, wanted to be part of the HFPA, and she applied and didn't get in. The Golden Globes, says that we're going to bring we're vowing to bring in black members now. The LA Times did an article. I'm going to put all these links up to this so that you can read these for yourself. And now, as a result of the LA Times did an investigation on the HFPA and found all kinds of surprise, underhanded BS going on. And these people are a bunch of mob bosses. Sorry for the references, but these people are a band of thugs. And why would that surprise you any? That 87 people, a tiny coterie of people, have this kind of power. 87 people. Not one of them black. Not one. There's more black butlers than there are members of the Hollywood Foreign Press. In 2021, this ain't 1921, and it wouldn't have been acceptable then. At least not for me, it wouldn't have been. I'll just speak for myself. It wasn't acceptable then. And sure hell ain't acceptable now. No black members. And then every year you get these stupid nominations. And you've got all this black talent out here. You have all of this black talent. And not one, except for maybe Regina King, Best Director nominee tonight for One Night in Miami. Please go and watch that movie. 3 women only. And this is what you heard in that report. Natalie Portman saying what she said. Women have been directing for centuries. Come on. Centuries they've been directing. Right in the 1930s in Hollywood, some of the best screenwriters were female screenwriters, not male screenwriters. It was women. And all we hear about is William Goldman. Do you know how many women, and there were many white women who were the best screenwriters? And they don't get the credit. They don't get the recognition. They don't. They do not get the due that is absolutely required. You have so many women directing and have been directing, and they're not hadn't up until Netflix and up until these other platforms out here, they weren't getting seen enough. I can run off a list of directors right now, and I've already done it. I can add Barbara Koppel to that list. I can add Jane Campion to that list. I can add Catherine Bigelow. There's so many. There is no excuse now. You can't tell me you do not see female directors of any group, any racial group. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that. Lulu Wang, you can't tell me that you don't see Lulu Wang. Don't tell me that you don't see Lulu Wang. Come on now. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that you don't see these directors. All of these directors, I've just read a fraction of their names. There are some awards organizations who do see them. I think that the Film Independent Spirit Awards, I think, has done a pretty darn good job of inclusion and looking at that. We've got to exalt awards bodies. And this is really what I want to get to, because look, LA Times writes these stories, and the former president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, Theo Kingma, was asked, literally in an interview back in 2013, was asked, and the organization who asked it was the RAP, which is a journalism, Hollywood publication, journalism that deals with film and everything. He told them that there was a black woman from England, from Britain, who was based in Britain, in England, Samantha Afole Prince. Black woman, applied to become a member of the HFPA in 2013. And the president at that time, Theo Kingma, said, regarding, hardly any black members at the time, quote, there was nobody, and they're still not in there. They weren't any black members at the time. Quote, there is nobody black because they can't afford to come and live here. I've been a member for 21 years, and I can promise you, I've never, ever heard anything racial. That's what Theo Kingma said. There's nobody. I want you to listen to that again as I read it, and tell me where you think tell me where you think the crude joke is in that sentence. I'm not even going to analyze and explain it, but just because and to a certain degree, don't you get done with the analysis and you want to listen to the solutions? Because believe me, you will hear some on this podcast if you listen long enough. If you stick through the hour plus, sometimes they're only 18 minutes plus, sometimes they're nearly 2 hours. If you stick here, you will occasionally hear some solutions. Because I do provide some sometimes. Because I think that's the most important thing, actually. I think more than sometimes, but that's another story. Quote, I'm going to read this again. There is nobody black because they can't afford to come and live here. I've been a member for 21 years, and I can promise you I've never, ever heard anything racial. That's the quote. I want you to think about that and think about where you find the racism in that statement. Oh, dearie me, because I know a load of black people who live in Los Angeles. So I don't know what Theo Kingma is talking about. But you see if you can figure out those two sentences you just heard. It is something, he goes on to say, that we should, and this is an interview from this Thursday now. This is a different thing from what I just read from the 2013 Jack Kingma, or Theo Kingma. This is now from Thursday. The Thursday Theo Kingma says, quote, "It is something that we should give a serious look at. Times have changed, but sadly our bylaws don't change as quickly," he said, noting it takes 2/3 of the membership to approve changes. So wait a minute. I'm laughing, but this is laughing to keep from crying. Because we should give a serious look at this, we should give a serious look. That should be something you should have given an actual due to years ago. And as Ava DuVernay has said, this is not new. This has been like this forever with the HFPA. They got no black people in there. As I said, they got more black butlers than they've got black members. Come on. We should give a serious look at this. A serious look? This organization's been around for 100 years? How long has the HFPA been around for? 50, 60, 70 years? The Golden Globes is what? In its 70 years now? 80? I don't know. And you're giving we should give a serious... This is Thursday. It was 3 days ago. 3 days ago he was saying this. We should give a serious look at this. Because we never realized that we didn't have a single black member. As I say, I'm laughing to keep from crying, mate. Because, honestly, dear listener, you cannot take him seriously. And it takes 2/3 of its membership to approve changes. Well, of course, the laws and the bylaws should change. So it's easier to pass a Supreme Court nominee to the United States Supreme Court. It is easier to get Clarence Thomas put on that bench than it is to get a black member in the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. I mean, come on. Even that shows you that this place is in bad MFing shape. If it takes 2/3 of your membership just to get a black member on, or to make changes to the bylaws, but you can get a simple majority to get Clarence Thomas on the United States Supreme Court, you are in real trouble. But I laugh, but I'm really crying. These are the tears, not of a clown, but the tears that black people sometimes try to suppress, living in such an oppressive, racist, anti-black world. Because 11% of the world can no longer dominate the other 89%. That has to end. And it will end. For now, the tears and the laughter intermingle together like sad, wounded soldiers determined to fight on. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It's all happening at the Politicrat daily podcast online store, and you can go there right now at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Lots of good new items, brand new, designed by yours truly. So please head to the Politicrat daily podcast online store now. Thank you very much.